wireless mouse, not to worry about wires, but it's easy to forget them.
Yeah.
What's the newest Blender? Because mine's still on 4.5. I think someone's like 5.
Yeah, you should upgrade to 5 at least. Yeah.
If you download Blender through Steam instead, it'll give you automatic updates, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. You can go to the beta feature and go to previous branches.
The only thing you have to keep in mind is every time there's an update, it resets your preferences and add-ons.
Yeah.
But are they still like downloaded and when they turn them on?
Yeah. There is a way to work around it, but it's too much worth. Oh, it's not worth the amount of effort.
Yeah, that seems so much easier.
I wish there was a way to mute my intro screen without having to go into the BIOS.
Oh yeah, my other computer, the Asus, had this really stupid sound that sounded like you were unsheathing a sword every time you turned on your computer, which was just frankly, you know.
I didn't know that some BIOSes did that.
Yeah, it's a little much.
More like the gaming brand computers where they try to make
Mhm.
it fancy, all cool.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm glad mine doesn't do that.
Makes you think you're a computer samurai.
But then you like, it's cool for home, but if you're like in class,
That's one of my main things that bothers me so much about having like a gaming laptop for all my stuff is because like obviously having a good fan is good, but it's so loud.
yeah.
And it's like everyone we're all quiet listening to the teacher just
Luckily, this one has a setting where it has like a silent mode or like a performance or a turbo mode, so luckily I don't have that problem. But as soon as I launch like Doom, Dark Ages or Monster Hunter Wilds, the fan just it sounds like it's gonna have a heart attack.
Especially with Monster Hunter. I'm gonna play Monster
Dude, that game is insane what they did with the DLC. Did you guys see that?
Which one?
What they
Which
essentially the performance of the game. It was like
Oh,
checking for DLC
yeah.
every frame, and if you disable that, you can boost your FPS by like 20 FPS or something.
And the developers couldn't find the problem behind people's FPS drops because they essentially had all the DLCs enabled.
It was essentially they were doing DLC checks every single frame that the game was
For what
running.
game?
For Monster Hunter.
Oh.
And it wasn't only for like major DLCs, it was for like costumes and like do they all I know is that it was for like
There isn't a major DLC yet, so it's just cosmetics.
yeah, cosmetics. So every single frame they would check if you had all the cosmetics in the frame. And if you did, then you got then it wouldn't run the check and you would get more FPS.
The only thing is I haven't struggled with frames, at least not on this laptop. But this is a new laptop, but I mean its RAM is only 16 gigs.
But yeah.
I know mine too, and it's I hate it so much.
It was probably just a result of somebody's time paying attention or something.
Cause I've wanted to play Monster Hunter, but it's because I like the creature design and because I don't wanna like kill the monster.
You don't have to kill them.
You don't?
Unless they're like Elder dragons, but you can just capture them.
Oh, okay. Cause my friend, like, that's one of his favorite games, and I was like, I don't know, like, beat these things up. Like, the
So-
boss fights is cool, but.
So you can just be like a zoo where you're just monster zookeeper?
No, it's to research them, but
Hmm.
the whole storyline is the guild. They have to protect the ecosystem, so you're not allowed to hunt monsters just for the fun of it. So lore-wise, all the monsters you hunt, there's either something wrong with them or they're destroying the ecosystem in some way, shape, or form. So gameplay-wise, you can hunt any monster you want for the materials, but lore-wise, you're only allowed to hunt the monster if it's authorized by the guild.
That's cool. 'Cause yeah, it's like, I like Pokemon because I like collecting the monsters though.
Yeah. They just faint all the time in Pokemon. They're just fainting. They're not hurt.
That's what I love about Power World.
Oh, you just
Yeah.
like your little creature with like a minigun shooting at them,
Or-
or use them as a flamethrower.
Yeah, flamethrower, that's funny.
Power was a lot of fun.
All right, everybody, how's it going? All right, let's do names again real quick. Let's start on this side with, help me out. Lawson. Jose? Anthony? Edward. Alec. Crimson. Help.
Me?
Yes.
Mark.
Mark, okay. Mark, they have a Mark in the morning class. Mark and, all right, link up. Okay, I'll link up.
It would be embarrassing if you don't know my name.
I'm pretty good with the names. I got it. Okay. All right, everybody. Good. All right. So everything was really, really compressed last time, and then I think I ended a little bit prematurely because I'm having a hard time, for whatever reason, mentally remembering what time the classes are this semester. But we go till 3:30, not 3 o'clock. Even though my morning class starts at 8:30, it goes till 11 o'clock. So.
I think you still managed to finish.
Did I? All right. Well, I don't know. I felt rushed. But okay. Everybody ready? Good. All right. Awesome. Yeah, we're going to be really, diving in here. But let's do a little bit of housekeeping over here. Again, a lot of you already have a bunch of Blender experience, so just sort of, we had something in place. A lot of, what we're going to be putting together this week is, a much more expanded version of what we had before. Let's make this work here. And then, but let me just, again, make sure that everybody's on the same page here. So let's come to preferences and talk about our saving. So if you don't have autosave on, which it should be on by default, you want to have that on. That's going to save it every 2 minutes. And I think by default, this one is like 2 or 3. 5 feels like a pretty good version here, right? Because this is going to allow us to do what's called versioning, not putting all of your eggs in the same basket, right? Because if you keep hitting Control S is the shortcut for what? Save, right? We all know that, right? And it's always better to Control S than not to Control S, certainly. However, every time you Control S, you keep saving in the same file, and it's possible that that file becomes corrupted.
Please, I come from South Africa where we had load shedding and power outages, and this thing has saved my life so many times. Control-Shift-A saves an increment, so you have a backup.
Yeah, so the incrementing or versioning, incremental saves. So the autosave here is doing that automatically, right? So it's giving you versions of what you have every 2 minutes. But it won't save more than 5 files, right? Whatever you have this set to, that's the limit, right? So if we look at where this is, I think I saved this in that 287 folder, which is, I believe, here. There we go. All right, so now we see what it's doing. Check this out. Here is the file. Every time I press Control S, this file gets updated, right? But this file and this file were saved, it hasn't done it yet this morning, this is from before. But as we go on, whatever you have that queue set to, it'll save that many files here. However, notice that these, you look at them and you're like, why is this not a Blender file, right? It's not a Blender file because there's this number here. It's adding this because, just to be clear, and I know a lot of you already know this, on any computer, you cannot have 2 files with the same name in the same folder, right? No operating system will let you do that because it doesn't make any sense, right? How would it know which one's which? And so you can have two files with the same name in different folders, but not in the same folder. And so that's why it's adding this number afterwards over here. And so if I wanted, let's say something horrible has happened to this one, and every time I try to open it, it says, nah, this is corrupted. No way. Yeah. And I've started crying a single tear that's running down my face. Then I would take one of these and I would need to move it to a different folder so that I could then delete the number, and now it will recognize it as a blend file and I could open this, okay? And so this, it's just good data redundancy strategy so that you have that. So in terms of, does that mean I'm storing more data on my hard drive? Yes, right? It'll be 5. If this is 5, it'll be 5x the amount of data. But for what we're doing right now, that's not going to be a problem, right? Like it's really, our files are just not that big. That's going to be an issue. If you start working with something much, much bigger later on, then there's other strategies. But yeah, and so this is doing exactly what Arlinka said. It's sort of automatically doing the versioning. You can do the versioning yourself by saving it with a different name, or save as or save incremental, right? So over here, save incremental automatically makes the main file have the number, and then in here, there we go. And so now this is the main one. Notice that the 1 is over here, and so this one is automatically recognized as a blend file. Everybody with me there? Okay, so as a way to quickly make sure that you can't use the excuse that my computer glitched out and I can't open my file, the first thing I'll ask is like, well, what about all the backup files that you surely have on your computer because you've had autosaved enabled and you've been doing it correctly from the get-go because we just did that on day 2 of class, right? Are you with me? Okay, great. Everyone got their notebooks today to write things down so that you move it from one part of your brain's memory to another part of your brain's memory, and therefore make multiple neurological connections and reinforce the knowledge in your mind. Okay, so here's what we had before. We were looking at the multiple different types of interpolation that were going on here. I want to just clean this up a little bit. And so, you know what? I'm going to want, let's just make the whole thing 5 seconds. And so I'm going to say 24 times 5. I think we did that on Monday. And then over here, I want to adjust all of these keyframes. And so under view here, when you're in, this is a little bit irritating right now, but now when I select a sphere, these are the ones I'm picking up from where we were last time. As I select a sphere, it shows me that sphere on the timeline. Unfortunately, the controls for this are a little bit different depending on what view you're in. So when you're in the timeline view, you come over here to view, and it says only show selected. If I uncheck that, now, even if I don't have anything selected, I'm seeing all 3 objects here on the timeline, which is probably what we want to be doing here, especially the first couple weeks, is we have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 objects on screen that we're sort of, really focusing on the animation and quality of movement. And so being able to see all of their keyframes on the timeline at the same time is probably going to be our best way to approach this. And so there's that. But if we come over and look at the dope sheet view, then this issue of whether we are looking at only the selected ones or not is this icon right here. This looks like a mouse. And so if that's off, now I'm only seeing what I have selected. And if it's on, it's only what's selected. If it's off, then I'm seeing everything. Okay, and then I believe that that icon is the way Blender wants to do it from now on. It's just that unfortunately, you're taking this during a semester where Blender is in, this part of Blender is in a high degree of transition than maybe other parts of Blender. And so, I mean, it's all changing all the time, right? But that's a good news, bad news thing. It's like, it's changing all the time. It's changing all the time. Kind of situation.
Peril. It was in peril.
It's in peril. Well,
Honestly, the people at Blender is the only people I would forgive for that. Because they do really good work.
yeah, I mean, like, yeah. We have to call out the things that are going to be problematic. But yeah, the timeline thing, I think we're just going to have this and this eventually. But under the graph editor, yeah, we have the same situation of whether we're going to see all the things or not all of them there. And so let's come back over to Dope Sheet and grab these and move them over so they're right about here so that we see things move a little bit with a little bit more snap. And then we have a second at the end to sort of process like, okay, they're at the end, right? Especially if we just have the one that doesn't interpolate at all happen right at the end of the animation, it's like you can't even tell what happened there. And so we have our 3 different types of interpolation happening here. And so, Jose, what kind of interpolation is this ball? All right, I'll come back to you. Anthony, top ball, what kind of interpolation?
Bezier.
I'll give you a second chance.
Bezier.
No, the top ball. It's not Bezier.
What? Linear.
Linear, yes, right. How do we know that one's linear? It moves at the same speed the entire time, and this guy here, especially seeing both of these at the same time, right? This one goes faster and then has to catch up at the end, right? And so this one is changing speed, whereas this one is staying the same. And then what's the name, Jose, what's the name for this one? I like the sound of that. Every question I ask you is an open note question, right? So like if you flip a page, read your notes, and then give me the correct answer, that is, in my book, just as good as giving me the correct answer right off the bat, because it shows that you wrote it down, which is wonderful. What do you think?
Number 1, timing, space, and rhythm. Like, it's staying still.
It's staying still. There's no interpolation. Lawson?
It's constant. But
Constant.
I'm pretty sure your top one is Bezier. Because it slows down.
Did I get those wrong? Thank you for pulling that out. Let's look here. Which one's which? This one.
I was also wondering if it's maybe just
Okay.
place or
Thank you for correcting me. Yes. Okay. Anthony, totally correct. Bezier, right? This one up here. In fact, okay, so here's what we're going to do next as a way to not do this again, is we're going to label some things and make a sort of template here that we can sort of incrementally use. And so let's label some stuff. Shift A, and we'll come up here with some text. So if you haven't used text before, we have this here. Let's look at it in the view. We've got that. So my apologies, Anthony, you were totally right. I'm going to just rotate this over so we have this to work with. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. And if we come back here and look at this, in order to edit what the text says, you have to go into edit mode. And so let's go in here and make some labels. So our Bezier, and in here, right, so the Bezier here is what we'll be selecting from the Blender menu, but Bezier is more of like the tool we're using to change the curve, right? And the curve is the important thing to understand here, right? And so a curve is easing, right? So you can ease in or ease out. In this case, this is doing both. So this is more, like that's the Blender name for it, but it's more the name for the handle technology. And the important thing here is the speed at which it's moving is changing because of the easing. Okay, let's tab back out of that. And so now I can Shift D this And if I want to, press Z to make sure it's lined up here, and then tab in and change this one to linear. And then tab out, and then Shift D, and then Z for, no, there's no apostrophe there. That looks like a, Shiar spelling of that or something. Here we go, tab. This one is constant. There we go. And let's save this. And let's do a little bit of manipulation here. And then we'll get into this more later, but by default, this will be in Blender what's called shade flat. The name for what we're seeing here is that we can see the individual faces. This phenomenon is called faceting, when we can see the faces, right? That's not a Blender term, that's just a 3D term, right? When you can see the faces, that's called faceting. And we can make them smooth by right-click and saying shade smooth. And so if we did that at the beginning, when we duplicated it, they would all stay shade smooth. But for the time being, so that they look smooth there, we have that in place. And I'll save again. And that's in place there. Okay, good. And let's just come up with a few materials. Actually, let's get the camera in place. So I had deleted my camera, so let's make a new camera here. And so I'm just going to Shift A camera. And that gives us a new camera at the origin. And if I want to zero out the rotation, anybody know the shortcut for that? Alt-R, right? So Alt plus each tool zeroes out that thing. And so, for instance, if I take this camera and move it over here, if I press Alt-G, that snaps it back to the middle. If I press Alt-R, that gets rid of all of the rotation. And then Alt-S would put all of the scale back to 1, but scaling a camera is not really like a thing. Yes?
Is there not a shortcut to do them all at once?
There might be.
I couldn't find one.
Yeah, I don't use it. If there is, I'd have to look. And you looked and you said they couldn't find one. Yeah. Yeah, I usually just jam Alt-G, Alt-R. You know, it seems like usually, I don't know, like at the beginning here when I'm doing it, I do actually want like one or the other. But regardless, I'll see if we can find anything else there. But let's get this camera sort of oriented straight. And so when I'm rotating it, what do I hold down to make sure it locks to different increments here? Control. Just Control, yeah. So I'm clicked on the gizmo there, and I'm able to move this around. Remember, I'm seeing the gizmos because I've got these 3 things checked, right? Which I really recommend having checked so that you don't, so you're not forcing yourself to have to use all of the shortcuts at the beginning. And so that's useful. And so now I can move this back a bit like this. And now I want to look through the camera. What do I press to look through the camera? 0. And I'm looking through the camera. There we go. And so now, if I want to, I can come in here and maybe tune this view a little bit and move it back on the Y. There we go. Kind of like that. So I'm kind of creating like a quasi orthographic camera here. Let's see. These are at the beginning. I want a little bit of padding here on this. Good. Okay. So now I've got that set up. Let's save. Camera's where I want it to be. And so now I can continue to do work here or come back into this view work. And then when I want to render, I'll be rendering from the view of the camera. What's the shortcut for render? F12 renders the view. Okay, so now this is the view from the camera, right? So if I want to look, boom, and then F12 there, but it's not lit like it is over here because I am in a different viewport mode up here, these 4, right? And so a lot of what we'll be doing here at the beginning, we may be working in solid view while we're just working on animating and really, talking about our deep travel into timelines. But when we render, it's going to render by default this view, which is appropriately called render preview. And so here, there we go. This looks like this because there are no lights here. So later, as we go on and we talk more about rendering, this will come up. And this is one of the things you have to deal with when you're working in 3D environments like this is by default, there is nothing. It's like you're in a black void, right? And so this makes it strange. It makes it a strange situation for both lighting and for reflections in that there's no stuff to be reflected. These are not things that you can easily reproduce in real life. Like you can't walk into a room devoid of reflection, right? It's not, as far as I know, physically possible to produce such a thing. And so we need some light in here. In this case, just some simple light. And so I am going to just add a sunlight, which will make sure that most of the scene is in place. The thing that you need to write down about the sunlight is sunlight only rotate, right? So the sunlight is supposed to mimic the light coming from the sun. All of the light rays are arriving in the scene in parallel, okay? And so moving the sunlight doesn't do anything. You won't see any difference, right? Here, look at the light in the scene. I select the sunlight, I press G. The lighting does not change at all, right? I press R, and now stuff's happening, right? So all of the light arrives parallel. It's just like, technically the light coming from the sun to the earth is not exactly parallel, but it's close enough, right? It's very, very close because the sun is so much bigger than the earth. And so, sunlight sort of makes it easy, but I want more light on the front of my object, right? So that these aren't casting weird shadows down on each other, and so that the front of the objects aren't in shadow. And just in terms of convenience, like keeping the sunlight in the middle of the scene just makes it easy to select and then do stuff to, but like it doesn't matter. And so now I have some lighting in my scene. I could press F12 and there we go. I'm seeing stuff now. And now this here looks like that there, right? Whereas when you're in solid view, that is not the case. This looks different, right? But this is not what is going to be rendered. The other view that don't worry about material preview for right now. Wireframe is useful in that it shows us all of the geometry of all of the objects here. You can see this in solid view as well. If you come over to this menu right here and click that and click the wireframe. Click the I'm in solid, I'm in here. Maybe that's different than I remember. There used to be a checkbox here, I thought, for seeing wireframe in solid view. Perhaps that is somewhere else in the new one. Regardless, we'll come back to it.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Is it here? Yeah. Is it?
It's like the two boxes that are intersecting, I think.
What are we trying
Like
to
to the left of the. It's
Oh, that one?
I think that one lets you see through them.
Oh, that's the X-ray.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you just trying to put the wireframe on top of the page?
On top of the solid. I thought there was a
No,
box here to see wireframe.
Actually, I think it's the left arrow. No, a little right. Yeah. Geometry, wireframe. Yeah.
There we go. That one. If we want to see that. There it is. We don't want to see it right now. Okay. Yes. It's in view. Yeah. So it's technically an overlay for that viewport. A lot of times if I want to see the wireframe, I just switch over here so I can see this. And then also, as we go on, there'll be instances where I want you to show the geometry, show the topology of the object. And when you do that in Blender, by default, it'll be this. And this, especially for old people like me, is practically worthless, right? This is black on dark gray. So it's really hard to tell what the hell is going on here, right? And so I recommend coming in here and setting the wireframe color to random. That way, it's some sort of the colors that we can see, especially when you guys record your weekly videos and stuff, and I give you directions like, do this thing, show me the wireframe. When you have this on here, then we can all see what's happening versus, talking over top of something that looks like this, which is really, really difficult to see what's happening. So just a, ease of use there for that thing. Cool. Okay, almost done with our scene setup here. Yeah, online we got Trenton and Ivan. How's that going? We're saving, let's get a couple materials. Again, like I'm going quickly. I just want to get some stuff set up because then we're going to sort of duplicate and riff on this one so we can work on the keyframes. But just to set something up so it doesn't look like so boring, just gray on gray on gray. So let's do that. I want fun glowy spheres, so let's do that. We're going to come up here, and I've got my spheres. Let's actually label these. And so this top one here is Bezier. And then this one here. Okay, the other thing I do is that by default it puts everything in alphabetical. And so something like this where I have 3 things that are the same but slightly different is that I'll do something like this just because I'm lazy, but I want them grouped together in the outliner. Is I'll go sphere Bezier, and then I'll say sphere underscore constant, and then I'll say sphere underscore linear, like that, right? And so now, instead of just naming them Bezier constant linear, which would have like spread them out all over the place here, the other thing I could do is I could organize them into a collection, right? The collection, we can come up here and right click and say new collection, and I could call this animated spheres. And then drag these 3 things into that collection like so as a way to stay organized over here. Just depends, right? But naming them like that, even if you don't have separate collections, just sort of keeps them together over there. I find that useful. Good. Okay, fun glowing. So over here, I'm going to select this top sphere, come over to our material tab, and make a new material. And yeah, we want this to be nice and glowy. So I'm going to add some emission here. And so as usual, I'm going to make it pink, like here, and then give it some strength. I see something happening there. If I were in solid view, I wouldn't see anything happening, right? Because by default, solid view is not going to show me the materials. You can come over here and say object color material. Even then, it's not respecting the emission. So I'm in the viewport shading right now. For right now, I'll probably spend most of the day over here because we're not doing anything that's going to be super render intensive. So we can have it look nice while we're working. Later on, if you're doing something that's super heavy, then it makes sense to work in these modes and then render in this mode. But for today, we can hang out over here and have it look nice. So we will. Great. And so I can dial up the strength, right? So this is as if the object is lighting itself, right? Again, I unfolded here under emission. I haven't changed the base color at all. I just picked a color and then dialed up the emission strength. But it's not making it a light in the scene, okay? It's not going to, look at this. It's not like lighting up the other objects for the most part, right? Unless you click some other boxes, that's not going to happen by default. The other thing we want to do is when we make a new material, you definitely want to label said material so that it's, you remember. So this is, I'm going to call this glow pink. There we go. And then let's come down here and I'll make another, we'll come down and I can select from the existing materials right here, as long as I'm in the material tab, and say pink and apply that there. And just to be clear about this, when you apply the same material to the same object, the material is separate from the objects, right? And so if I come in and I change the color, notice that both of them change. Why is that? Because they both have the same material on them. So let's put it back to pink. If I wanted this object here to be blue, I can come over here to this handy cryptic button. And this is going to duplicate whatever I currently have selected. And so if I duplicate this, and now it makes it glow pink 1, 01, right? Why is it 01? Back to that file naming situation, right? And now I'm going to change it to blue, and it stays, this one stays pink, and this one is blue. Why is that? Because I created a second material. There are two materials now, right? Each one on a separate one. And obviously I should rename this glow pink, the blue glow pink to glow blue, because I'm not insane. I want it to, be the correct name for what's happening. I mean, you guys can make a judgment about my sanity later on after we know each other for a while. But here we go. And let's make another one. Again, we'll duplicate this one and then give this a kind of purple-ish look. I'm just doing some of my favorite colors. You can do whatever you like there. And so here, there we go. Okay, that looks pretty good. So they are lighting themselves, but they don't look like they're glowing, right? They're just kind of like they're brighter, but not glowing, right? So a little bit here about this. CG formula for glow, like regardless of program here, in order to make a glow effect, what is it? You have to blur the image and then
You need like fog or like dust or something like volumetric.
okay, even simpler, like 2D formula. Like I've just got a Photoshop file and I want it to look glowy, right? If we blur, how do we make something brighter? What blend mode do we want for brightness?
Screen.
The screen or add, right? A screen is a version of add. I just say add because the math is clear there. We're just adding the number on top of the other numbers. So blur and add, or screen. And so that's going to make something look like it's glowing, right? There's all sorts of other bells and whistles you can do on top of this. And so that's a more complex three-dimensional way of doing it. Here, like this is just sort of the basic formula. And we're going to make the basic 2D glow. Why? Because we're going to blur the actual image, not really deal with volumetric lighting yet. So in order to do that, right, how do we get a 2D image out of this? We render it, right? What's the shortcut for render? F12, right? So once we render something, now it's just a bunch of pixels, right? And so we could do anything we want with this image. We could take this image into Photoshop and add a glow filter, or we could do a lot of that just here in Blender without having to go anywhere else in the compositing view, right? So the compositing viewport here is after you've rendered, what if you want to apply some like Photoshop filters to the image or do basic color correction? And so if we come over here, we get this. This is nice and new in Blender 5. And we say new for compositing setup. And that shows us a few things. If you haven't pressed F12 yet, I don't think you'll see anything here in the back. So if you come over to this view and you say, give me some new compositing nodes, and you don't see anything, then press F12 so that the computer has rendered it. Even though we haven't saved the render, meaning like we've said, like save it onto my hard drive, Blender is holding on to the render in working memory or something. Anyways, and so what do we have here? This is a, nodes, right? Lots of different nodes in Blender. I'm sure if you pay attention to any of this online, you've heard about geometry nodes, where we use this kind of interface to manipulate the geometry. These are compositing nodes, and so we're using the nodes to manipulate the pixels of the render, okay? So there's different nodes, different node environments for different jobs, okay? So here, in most of what we want to get done here in this view would be Photoshop-like things. Color correct, maybe boost the contrast, add a glow, things like this. And so here, this is essentially, this represents what's coming out of, when you press F12, what did I get? This represents those pixels, right? That whole grid of RGB values. And then over here, this means that I can see it, and then this is the one that actually gets saved to disk. You want those both to be the same thing almost all the time. So anyways, Shift A, and we can look for bloom, which is another word for glow. So yeah, here the vocabulary really starts to fall on its face. Bloom, glare, glow. Variations of the same similar idea, okay? And so in this case, it's in the glare node, but we have it set to bloom if you search for bloom. And if you, nice thing now, if I want to put this node in between here and here, I can just put it here and click, and it will put all the nodes together. You can also do that yourself if you really want to. You can select this little noodle node here, and sometimes like actually selecting to delete them is like a little bit, okay. I deleted this one, and so now if you click and hold this one, you can run it from there to there. And now, there we go. This is the glowy Tron environment in which I want to spend my time working on the fundamental principles of motion graphics. We got some glow, and in terms of the highlights here, you can control the strength of this and the size. Right, so the size here, remember what was the fundamental formula for glowing? What's the first thing you have to do? Blur, right? And so this is the size of the blur. Also in your mind, what is blurring? Blurring is averaging. That's all it is. You run an averaging algorithm across the pixels, but it starts to become fairly computationally expensive, right? Because when you average something, how do you, if I gave you 3 numbers, how do you find the average? Math? Who is your math teacher? What's that?
You add them all together and then divide it by the number of things that you have.
Exactly, right? So just Crimson's reiterating what we were all thinking. Right? Right? Yeah. To average any given number of numbers, let's call that number of numbers n, we add together all of the n's, and then we divide by n, right? However many numbers there were. Everybody with me there? Okay? But that's just for averaging n amount of numbers. How many numbers are in a pixel? Yes. What are those 3 numbers?
Red, green, blue.
Red, green, blue, right? And so And when you're averaging a pixel, we need to think about this pixel, the pixel that we actually want to average, and how many pixels surround any given pixel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And so in order to make this pixel the average of the surrounding pixels, we need to at least have 8 numbers that we're averaging here to find the average for this one, right? And this is how big of a blur is this? This is a 1 pixel blur, which is in many instances like visually indistinguishable. Okay, and so yes, Alec has responded with an appropriately highly raised eyebrows, right? Because he understands the exponential box which we are about to open. Because now, if we want a 2 pixel blur, which is also not that visually exciting, right? We must go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? That's in the second layer. 16 plus the original 8, right? And how many, that's 16 plus 8, that gives us 24, right? 24 times how many colors per pixel? 3, right? And so that is 72, right? And then that's just to get a 2 pixel blur of that and we've only found the average of 1 pixel in the image. And how many pixels are there in the image? Well, we have this number across the top, this number across the side. Am I making my point here, right? This is blurring can be very computationally expensive. It's not done exactly like this, right? There's all sorts of black magic, truly smart people, binary bit shifting math stuff to shortcut this, which I am not qualified to speak to. But blurring is expensive. So blurring, this very, very fundamental idea, because there's a lot of other effects that are built on blur, like glowing and other stuff, can be a very expensive thing. So keep this in mind. Blurring is averaging, and that's finding this view. And so this slider right here, this is how big the blur is. This is not in pixels. This is in, I have no idea what the metric of this is. Probably like some sort of normalized value of like the size of the frame or something to that effect. But anyways, you can see as I extend this, it blurs further out, right? And it gets softer as we go out because, right, think about the averaging, right? You're getting further and further away from the pixels that would be originally bright. And so the average number will be coming down, so on and so forth. Does that make sense there? Okay, we'll come back to this a bunch later when we start to talk about, compositing and color correction and stuff some more, all that kind of stuff. Great. Okay, so this image looks cool. I like this. This looks great. If I come back here, it's not, I don't have the cool stuff. Why do I not have the cool stuff? We need to tell the viewport, the layout, to use the compositing stuff. And so over here, you can come down here and say, by default, it's disabled, but we can say I only want to see it when I'm looking through the camera, or, bless you, I want to see it all the time. And for right now, I'll just say all the time. There we go. And so now, when I'm working and I'm moving around, it'll be nice and glowy even in the viewport, which is fun, right? Just it'll be more fun to look at while we're doing some stuff here, right? And like when you get that Cyberpunk Tron job, there you go. You're in business there, right? Good. Let's make one more material for the words. And so we'll start with glow blue. And I'll just make it kind of white. Actually, I'll make it, I'm going to duplicate it first, and then I'll call it glow white. And then make this white. There we go. And then I'll apply that same one to the other text here. And so now I have a much more fun thing to look at. Trenton asks, is this assignment going to be just the 3? So yeah, what's due tomorrow is just the easing. The stuff I'm telling you now is not necessary for what you're turning in tomorrow night, right? Like it's the second week. So it'll take a little while to get this train going, okay? And so like obviously most of the time I had time to cover this kind of stuff the first week last week. So we would have more to do the first week. If you want to include this stuff in tomorrow night's version of the assignment, by all means, go ahead, because we're going to certainly include them in the following week's stuff, but it's not required for tomorrow night, okay? Because not everybody is we're not all quite synchronized here in terms of like, some people are with us right now, some people are time shifting this, okay. Good question, Trenton. Yeah, and we're going to work our way towards both squashing and stretching, and squash and stretching. Okay, great. Let's save this again. 0, come back here, and now if I have 12, that looks a lot cooler for sure. And we've got stuff in there that are working. That may be a little bit big on the glow. I'm gonna back it off just a touch. There we go. We want it to be glowy, but not unreadable. Okay. Let's save. Okay, cool. I've made my example file for, we kind of skipped ahead. We'll skip back now, right? And so essentially what we did here is our example file for demonstration of easing here. We've got our ease in, ease out, our linear, and our, yeah, this is good. So we're going to call this one, we're going to save incremental here. And actually, we're going to call this Principles of Motion Graphics, POMG _, here we go, fundamental tweening, right? So everybody has this in their notes. These two words are synonymous, tweening and the more mathy interpolation. So when you read the animation texts that I provide to you, the animator's survival guide, the illusion of life, more often than not, they'll use the word tweening, okay? Because tweening used to be a much bigger, it used to be a separate job, okay? Like what is doing the tweening for us? The computer, right? Right? And because we're doing computer animation here, right? Before, when everybody was hand drawing everything, the keyframes that we're setting with those little diamonds, those were people getting paid more. And then the people drawing the pictures that go in between the keyframes, right? Mickey Mouse is here, and then Mickey Mouse is here, right? This getting Mickey Mouse into a pose that looks great here, and getting him into a pose that looks good here, that's somebody who makes the big bucks. Getting Mickey Mouse in all the in-between poses, that's, I think everybody was making good money at Disney, or at least I hope they were. I can't speak to whatever their payroll was, but that was, a second tier down, right, in terms of all those things. So,
That's the most work.
well, yeah, I mean, depends how many keyframes there were and everything else. It's all, drawing stuff by hand is a lot of work, right? I mean, a lot of, definitely, that's an archetype of student that we see a lot of, where they're very enamored with hand-drawn animation, but the idea of creating a lot of hand-drawn animation on your own as a one-person endeavor it's a lot. There's not a lot of people who go down that road. Like, where like, oh, I'm going to draw right? When's the last time you drew 24 pictures in one day? For those of you at home, there's not a lot of hands being raised in the classroom, right? Right. Because how long of an animation would you get if you drew 24 pictures in one day? 1 second, right? Well, I'll say we're going to use 12 FPS, right? Because a lot of times hand-drawn animation is at 12 FPS precisely for this reason, right? Because that means you would get how many seconds? Edward, how many seconds? If we do 24 drawings and we're doing 12 FPS, how long is that animation? 2 seconds, right? Because each second is 12 individual drawings, right? So yes, I too enjoy watching wonderful hand-drawn animation. However, understanding the scale of the labor involved in those situations is important, right? Like just it's something that I encourage you to actually think about. It's something that's communicated, I think, a little bit more clearly when you start talking about other media or other art forms or other genres, right? With architecture, everyone looks at the pyramids in Giza, and that's the first thing that occurs. One of the first things that occurs to you is like, this was a lot of work, like a historic amount of work, right? Possibly the most amount of work ever done in the course of human history. And so it's obvious that was a lot of work. Whereas like watching Bambi, that may not be your initial reaction. It's like, oof, that was a lot of work. Right, there's probably other things you're thinking of first.
Bambi was traumatized.
Yeah, there's that part of it. Like there's the traumatic reaction to the plot twist in Bambi that, a lot of people were not prepared for. There we go. So let's save this as POMG, fundamentals of tweening. Okay, and save that. Great. And so now we've got our sort of basic categories of tweening here, right? But this is 3 different Ivan said he just looked up something about Disney Pay, and he says, quote, "It was reported they got paid well." Okay, well, I'm glad that someone reported that, Ivan. Like it was a long time ago. We have to adjust for inflation. There's a bunch of there's a bunch of further questions to ask. However, he says at least you got a $5 bonus for a good idea, which but depending on when this was, like that wasn't nothing, but anyways, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances to consider here. So good. First, please take notice that this is types of tweening. So moving at a constant speed, essentially not moving, and then all this one up here is showing us is that the speed is changing. Okay? And so we're going to make another example here where we explore this, the idea that curvature equals a change in speed. 95% of the keyframes that we make are going to be in this category, okay? My purpose of us doing this is for you to understand these 3 different settings. However, almost all of the stuff we're going to be doing is going to be in this category, because in order to make something look like it's alive, most of the time it needs to accelerate or decelerate at the appropriate times, right? If it were to always move at the same speed, this is only good for a type of robot, right? Like even robots, not necessarily, but more people doing robot dances, right? Like definitely linear movement there. So keeping that in mind. So with that in mind, let's go and save as, and we'll call this tweening curves. So a separate file here. Okay, great. And I'm gonna, let's remove this one and this one, and then I'm gonna turn these things off for the time being, so we can just look at this. Okay, let's do a little bit more like the example there, in that we'll have it go across the screen and back. And so if I want to make sure it gets back to the exact same place there, I'm going to hold down X here, and I can work like a text editor here. If I have this keyframe highlighted, I can Control C and Control V it over here. And then another really great shortcut, if you're holding stuff, if you're moving things here, if you hold down Shift, it'll help to snap it to the timeline. And so now we can have it ease in and ease out back to the, so there, speeds up. So this would be sort of a mild ease here. And so we're going to call this tab, and we'll switch it to easing. And then I'm going to take this tab back out, and let's Shift-D-Z, so moving this down, so that then we can work with this one here. In this case, I'm going to turn this back on, so I'm not accidentally switching the keyframes there. And yeah, so now, remember, every time we have curvature, we are accelerating or decelerating here. And here, with these handles, we can start to control the amount of accel and decel. And so here, if I take the handles and pull them out, right, I'm not moving them up and down, I'm trying to keep them balanced, but I'm grabbing the Bezier handle and pulling it out to create more of a dramatic S shape here, like this. And so now we have a version of what was happening with what we saw before, where the balls were sort of catching up to each other, right? But if we look at them both at the same time, we can see both of their timelines at the same time. Here's that Control spacebar so that we can look at just one thing. And so in this case, there we go. I'm going to grab this handle to sort of flatten that out like that. So that's not going. And so if I could look at both of them at the same time, right, you can see on the graph here, when we make this a more dramatic S curve, it means that we're starting off slower, then getting faster, and then slowing down sooner into the second position. And so at what point on the graph here do the balls pass each other? Where the lines intersect, right? Here would be where this ball, which is the second one, the one that's lower on the screen in our view, which is behind the other one, passes the other one right there, and then they both line up again here, and then it doesn't start off as fast. It's got to catch up and passes exactly at this point. And so if we look at that, Control spacebar to come back. Remember, Control spacebar makes whatever part of the interface I'm over full screen. Okay, so especially if you're on a laptop, I find this one very helpful for doing this when it's time to get nitty-gritty with the keyframing, and also for doing this just to sort of focus on what I'm doing without having all of the interface junk in my view. So bless you. And then over here, let's make this one blue. Okay, so we can see it. There we go. But which ball travels, in total, which ball travels a greater distance? Lawson? Neither. It's a trick question, right? The keyframes are exactly in the same location. They both start at exactly the same pace. They both stop at exactly the same place. They both finish here, or they're in the middle at the same. It's the The keyframes are the same, right? It's what happens in between. The tweening is different. The keyframes themselves are identical, right? Which is why part of what the point I'm making here is that the dope sheet here, this view is great for usually the first part of the process, what I'm going to call blocking out the animation. I need to be here at this time, then I need to be over here at this time, and then I need to end up over here, wherever those 3 spots are, right? But that's only the very first part of animating. The next thing of like, how do I get from here to there? That's a lot of coming over to here to be able to make those decisions about how I'm going to get there. Because just because I'm here and then I'm there, that's part of it. But then how am I going to get there? Okay, so let's label this one. And so again, I'll grab this one here and Shift D, Z, right? I press Z just to lock it in, so it's the same thing. And so then we'll tab in here, and I'll call this extreme ease. I know I'm spelling extreme wrong there. That's, I'm a child of the 90s. That's my spelling of it. Cool, that's there. And so all of these are, because we have this S-shaped curve, it's just that one S is curvier than the others. Both of these are doing an acceleration and deceleration. So these are both ease in and out. Right? This one also is ease in and out. There you go. What if we didn't do both of those things? What if we didn't curve here and curve there? What if we only curved in a specific direction? We shall examine that. So let's zoom out here. Let's come back to the beginning. And let's grab this one. And again, remember, the reason I'm able to Shift D these things and move them up and down is way back on Wednesday when I set the keyframes, I only keyframed the X, okay? If I had keyframes on the Y and the Z, I wouldn't be able to Shift D these spheres because when I press play, they would snap back to the other, they would all be on top of each other, right? And so keep that in mind. If you're having that issue, it's because you may have set keyframes on all of the positional dimensions, and we'd want them, in our case, just on the X. Okay, so here, again, I'm going to Shift D, Z, bring this one down. And so here, again, I just want to see just this one. So I'm going to press this button and then look at this. Okay, and so Control Spacebar here. And so we are just going to ease in here. And so in this case, I am going to manipulate the curve like so. Right, and so we will, I'll chill this out a little bit here too, just make these handles a little bit shorter. Again, I'm trying not to, I'm being careful not to do stuff like this, okay? Because I want this smooth curve here in order to demonstrate this. Coincidentally, I think I forgot to mention this, when I was doing the S curve, you don't want all this selected, just over here. I was being careful not to drag this down here, where this is going to actually mean we go backwards before we go forward, which we may want in some instances, but not right now. And so we're going to do this with this one. And then here, let's look at all these together. And so here, we're essentially easing in, right? So this curve here means that we're moving very quickly at the beginning and then slowing down, getting to our second halfway point at exactly the same time all the other spheres get to the halfway point. It's just that this one started off really fast and then starts very slow returning and then speeds up towards the bottom. But see how this is exactly 120 frames long? What does this ball look like it's doing? If I took this third one and just rotated it this way, what would it look like? It looks like it's bouncing, right? And so what is the up and down axis in Blender? If I want to go up in Blender, which dimension is that? Z, right? Everyone has that down in the notes. Up in Blender is Z. And what color is Z? Anthony?
Green.
Blue. Blue. Yeah, green is Y, and red, X, right. You got to get those memorized. If you memorize those three, it's the same in every program.
What if you're colorblind?
Yeah, that's a really good point. You should bring that up with all the people who manufacture these programs. I have no idea.
You should actually, instead of like all three of them being circles, like it should be different shapes.
They probably have something where you can edit the colors.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do that. I mean, I'm not...
There's probably like a branch or something.
I mean, I really don't... I mean, I know there's different types of color blindness, so there'd be like different fixes for this problem. Like, I have no
One
idea.
of my favorite accessibility options in games these days is arachnophobia. Sometimes it makes it worse, actually.
Like, you have to go and like redo the game with no spiders?
No, if you switch on arachnophobia mode in many games, it changes the spider to look like something else. But sometimes the replacement is more terrifying than the spider itself. Like these giant orbs with eyes coming after me.
I mean, it seems like a spider is an orb with eyes, right? Like, I guess there's the legs, right? But yeah. And so that's one curve, and let's complete our set of curves here. So again, I'll Shift D, Z, move this down right about here, and this one we're going to do the opposite, and so we'll curve in this way, and then here, in order to, we want to make this kind of shape where it's going to come up like this, and we need to select this one, right click, and handle free. Now I should be able to manipulate the handles here without the auto balancing on this middle one. And so I can create that kind of shape. Again, on the handles on the sides here, I'm being careful to try and keep these straight like this.
I think if you hold in control, it'll snap.
Is it control? Yes, control. Holding down control will make sure that you have to really try and not make it straight. There we go. All right, and so now let's look at all four of these together. Okay, remember, this is the one we just did, and this will be this curve here. And so, Alec, if you had to bet money, right? Remember, this is the one we just did, okay? And then this is the one that corresponds to this curve. Which one is going to go out? Which one is going to come out of the gates faster, top or bottom? Okay. Alex says top. Alec, how much cash do you have on you? Everybody get your wallets out. No. Yes, the top one, right? That's going to go faster, right? And so this one's going to wait and catch up and bounce off that back there, right? And so if we look at these two together, here and here, turn that off. And so if I select this one and this one, right? So we created this sort of opposite easing. This one is starting out quickly and slowly getting to the second one. And this one is starting out slowly and then speeding up and then essentially rebounding off of there, like so. But again, which ball is covering the most amount of ground? They're all the same, exactly the same, right? They all start in the same place at the same time. The middle is in the same place at the same time, and the end is at the same place in the same time. It's all just the tweening, how they're getting there, right? And so what I would call this one here is, let's Shift D and Z, bring this down. And so tab, this is going to be ease in. And so the terminology here can be a little bit confusing, right? We're easing into this middle keyframe here, right? Like that's where we're slowing down into that. And so there we go. And then this next one, we will say and let's reframe the camera here a little bit on this one. And so all of them together look like that, right? And so the ones on the outside are ones where we're just easing into the second location, easing out of this one, and then these two are essentially, one is a more amplified version of the other. More curvature equals more accel slash decel, right? Whether it's an acceleration or deceleration sort of matters which way the curve is going. But the sharper the curve, the more something is accelerating or decelerating. Cool. Okay, let's come back here and reference what we're looking at, right? And so what we've been exploring here is this part of it, the eases, right? That really, really dramatic S-curve, that's this one here. The less dramatic S-curve, this one here. Here we had this one and the inverse of this one. And then what is this one here? What's that?
That's linear.
Linear, right? These are straight lines. And so it's just going up and, or up, and it's going across and back, but no change in speed. Exactly the same. No, you don't have to necessarily make the orbs glow, Trenton. Okay, great. All right, so we looked, we dialed deep over here. Over here, timing, spacing, and rhythm. A lot of this has to do with frame rate, right? And so if we're running at the same frame rate, if our frames are closer together, we'll sort of move more slowly. If they're further apart, we'll speed up. But in this one, I really want to demonstrate frame rate here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and save this one. And then I'm going to save as, and I'm going to call this one frame rate. And let's make sure we just have the easing. We're going to come back to just our top one here. Get rid of these. Okay, great. And so now let's discuss this. Most of the time in this class, we remember we're going to end up making a movie, right? Movie file. The two main parameters of any given movie file are going to be the resolution. For our resolution, most of the time we're going to be working in HD. What size is an HD frame? What? 1080, but what 1080 is the number of what's in what direction? Pixels in yeah, 1080 is right, but
1980 by 1080.
no, we're just in resolution now. We're going to get the frame rate in a second.
1980 by 1080.
Yes, so 1080 is the number of frames or number of pixels up and down.
But I only know because YouTube, I clicked 10.
Okay, but now's your opportunity to solidify this knowledge in your mind the correct way, right? 1080, right? It's abbreviated as 1080p, right? Because most of the time the resolutions are defined by their vertical number. Because if you know their vertical number, you can infer their horizontal number because most of the time they're 16 by 9 aspect ratio, but not always, right? And especially, but most of the time, for right now, simple town, we're going to be using this resolution. And then the other, Anthony, parameter of a movie is the frame rate, right? And that's going to be in frames per second. And what, for those of you who took 184, what was the frame rate of most of the movies you made in that class? 24 FPS, right? Frames per second. And so this would be the resolution and frame rate of the movie, right? And so remember, a movie is just a series of still pictures that we play back one after the other, right? And most of the time, we are showing 24 of them a second. If once you get past 12-ish, it starts to look like continuous motion. This is the magic of animation. If we take pictures, if you take the flip book and you flip the pages fast enough, it starts to look like the thing's moving, right? That's the whole perceptual phenomenon that we're exploiting here. And so we have the size of the frame, and then we have the speed at which it's going, okay? And so most of the time, we're going to want to keep this, right? And so at the end of the day, we're probably going to be making like an MP4 file, right? And it's going to have these parameters up here, okay? But as we go on, we're going to explore other frame rates, okay? Because this number up here, most of the time we're not going to change this, because if you make it less, it's really going to look like retro, but not in a good way. It's just going to look like old stuff that's old, that looks low fidelity, because history is lower fidelity than the present, which is presumably lower fidelity than the future, right? As we move this forward, this way is forward in time, we're getting higher and higher fidelity stuff, meaning more and more pixels. Because more pixels means more detail in the image, right? Because 1920 by 1080 is referred to as 1080 what, Crimson? P, what does the P stand for?
Is it not pixels or?
No, it's not. That's a good guess, but it's actually for progressive scan. We don't. Progressive scan, yeah.
Feature on.
Yeah, on the monitors, but like we don't need to open that can of worms today. The this, but at Best Buy, I don't even think you could still buy a 1920 by 1080 TV. Most things are like, how big is your TV at home?
I only know like inch-wise, but not like that. I don't even know. My dad likes big TVs, but I think ours is like 72 inches.
72 inches, right? That's a large television. But how many pixels across? Anybody know? Like what is the common?
Well, it's either 1080 or 4K.
4K, right? 4K. What does 4K mean? 4,000 pixels.
That your computer's gonna die.
Right. So 4K here, the resolution for, so 4K is what a lot of, pretty much, I would probably all the, if I gave you, I don't know, $800 and said, go buy me a TV at Best Buy, like right now, right? Almost all of them at Best Buy are going to be 4K televisions. And so that means they are 40 by 2160, right? And we abbreviate 3840 or round it up to 4,000 4K pixels, okay? This is also, right, this one down here, this is called HD, and this one is sometimes called UHD for, what does HD stand for? High definition. What does UHD stand for? Ultra high definition, right? It's just marketing gobbledygook, okay? Like we could call it extreme high definition or monster high, like whatever. They're just, it's just marketing nonsense, okay? This is actually valuable information. Like we're making exactly this many pixels, okay? And so if you noticed, these numbers are 2x these numbers here, right? 3840 by 2160 are exactly 2 times both of these. And so if this is an HD frame, okay, a 4K frame is this big, okay? So keep that in mind. An HD frame, a 4K frame is not twice as big. It's 1, 2, like I didn't draw it exactly square, 3, 4. Right? It takes 4 HD TVs to get as many pixels as you get on one 4K TV. Everybody with me there? Okay. So, however, for the class, because we don't want to, this class isn't about render wrangling. I don't want you to like spend a bunch of time. I want you to spend time animating, not figuring out how to get your computer to pump out as many pixels as possible, right? We're going to do this, maybe for the final, we'll make a 4K one or whatever. Like that's a 4K TV, and we could watch it. But, we'll do some A/B stuff later in the semester where we can you even tell that there's more pixels here, right? And in some cases, the answer to that is no. In some cases, it's yes, but, Okay, so just so we all, I'm sure you've heard other teachers tell you this stuff before, but just to bring us all together onto the same page here about what are the 2 main parameters of any given movie file. These are the 2 main ones, right? We have how many pixels are the pictures that we are watching, right? And how many pictures per second are we being shown, okay? And so over the course of the semester, we're pretty much going to stay at 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, okay? But allow me to just say one thing else, right? So we had this HD to UHD progression. This has happened over the course of my teaching career, right? Like when I started teaching these classes, 14 years ago, HD was the 4K of the time, right? Where it was like, hold on to your butts, we're going to render HD. And everybody was like, whoa, right? Because when I started teaching the class, we were probably rendering 640 by 360 movies, right? And because now the computer hardware is better, the monitors are better, everything's better, right? And, those of you who are tuned into this stuff, I don't even know what the nonsense gobbledygook word is for this, but like there is 8K stuff. In fact, I think at Best Buy, if you went down there now, you could buy an 8K TV. The bad news is I don't know what you would watch on it, right? Because there's a bunch of issues here. Like there's not a lot of people. In order to actually get 8,000 pixels, like either you're going to need to make sure you capture 8,000 pixels with the camera, or you up-res the thing you're watching.
Graphics cards these days can upscale easily.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things there.
30 FPS as well, the TV.
Right. But Edward, what were you going to say?
Not super important, but I think it is notable to mention that 8K is only like 8K on like a height-ish.
I mean, it'll be going this way. The 4K is across.
Because resolution is kind of exponential.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, I think it's even million 4K is like almost 6 months on that one.
Right. That. Yeah, that's the number that when I drew this down here in the corner, that's exactly what we were talking about, right? Because this is an HD frame. 1, 2, 3, 4 HD frames is a 4K frame. If we take this and then we do this, right? This is 4 4Ks, 1 8K, and for this we end up having an exponential relationship because now how many HD frames do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's 16. There's 16 of them, right? Because we have 4 and 4 across, right? So exactly, right? We have this exponential, they're squares, right? So we have what is the formula for the area of a square?
Isn't it just the sides times 2?
Yeah, the width times the height, right? Right. And when those two are the same, it's the number times the number. So there we go. Yeah.
But I was gonna say, like, my dad, my mom and I, we went to Best Buy. My dad said something about a $25,000 TV, and I thought he meant like 2,500. And he takes us over there, and it was actually 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
As big as the screen there, but it's like it was too smooth that it made us all uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like I didn't see the point in it being that expensive because it was like, oh, it's like the visuals are like AI enhanced or something like that. And I'm just like,
Oh, it's really.
Yeah. Once you're investing in cutting edge technology, it's really the money you're spending is about the story you can tell people when you bring them over to your house to show off your super expensive technology. Yeah. The actual, optical or perceptual difference for that extra $23,000 is, minimal.
964 by 180. That's what's
Is that what 8K is?
no, that's not 180. What is that?
3840 times 2, that's going to be, I don't know, like a bunch.
The
Yeah.
one that is 2000 in the 2000s. Even though this laptop screen is pretty small, it can run at that resolution, but also
Mm-hmm.
so even though you go upper resolution, it's not necessarily the most
Okay.
convenient.
So everybody is right here. Not necessary. Okay, right? Because we're getting. When do we need more pixels? When the actual screen gets physically larger. Okay, right? In terms of if the screen size stays the same, we're pretty much at the point in 4K where you can keep jamming more pixels into the same size, but will anyone be able to see it? Like, not really. We're like kind of like just at the, like, it really depends how close you are to the screen. Like, am I standing here? Like, maybe I could tell then, right? If it's 8K or 4K or something like that. But if I'm not on a TV, if I'm projecting it onto some much larger screen, like a movie theater or something like that, or a wall or a side of a building, then each pixel is bigger physically, and then it starts to matter. Doesn't matter. My point to you is that resolution, right? Our we'll call it our max perceptual quality here is 4K, certainly functionally for all of us here. For FPS, right? FPS doesn't really operate on this same parameter, okay? Where more is better, right? Is the future every movie running at 4,000 frames per second? No, right? Because there's sort of some confounding factors here. So the FPS that we use, this is the FPS of, major motion pictures, right? So even before digital, when we're filming everything on real film, 24 frames per second settled in as the frame rate of cinema, right? The capital C cinema. Like, this is what cinema looks like. And it does not look, quote unquote, better when we start to crank this up in terms of cinema, okay? When do we want more frame rate? There's a separate issue here for video games, because video games are interactive. We need interactive. We need a fast response time. 24 FPS is not really, you can tell, you can certainly feel that there's a slight delay when you're pressing the button versus when something happens on screen. And so, this is where we get into the arms race of, video games here, right? Like, for me, as an old person, 60 FPS is fine. I can't tell the difference between 60 and 120. Like, maybe those crazy fragging professionals, that have the mouses named after them, esports professional. Yeah. So for those of you at home, Lawson just rolled his eyes like pretty substantially, right? It was, I would say it was a nice eye roll, like one that I would emulate. And yeah, the same thing. Like, I just can't tell after that. 60 FPS is plenty smooth. But when we talk about media, cinema, animations, things like this, in the most part, we want to be at 24 frames per second. If we go above this, it starts to look, not of a quality that is culturally undesirable, right? As a culture, we've decided that like 24 FPS feels like cinema, okay? And when you go beyond that, it feels different. For those of you who may remember, there's a bunch of controversy over this with the Peter Jackson Hobbit movies. Did anyone see all the Lord of the Rings stuff in the theater? Yeah, right, because he was not of this mind, and he's a man with lots of money and resources, and so he decided to release some of those movies at like 60 frames per second in the theater. So those of you at home, Lawson just made a really disgusted face, right? And that's you just encapsulated the media response to watching those movies in the theater. Everybody was like, ugh, this doesn't feel right.
Filmed at 60 FPS, or was it?
Yeah. No, they filmed like, he's like a, they had all the super expensive cameras. Yes.
When I was watching Avatar, the new Avatar Fire and Ash,
Mm-hmm.
something felt different every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell if it was just my eyes or what the hell was going on. Then I saw an article online that James Cameron, on specific scenes, boosted the frame rates that they recorded at. So throughout the movie, the frame rate changed. And honestly, it was irritating.
Yeah, I mean,
because it was disorientating.
that's really abnormal to have like the frame rate change during a piece of cinema. That's like not usually done. But again, yeah, James Cameron, Peter Jackson, like these are people with like entire movie studios worth of resources to like try out some crazy stuff that they've want to do.
Ghostbusters did it.
What's that?
With the ghosts and Ghostbusters, I think they recorded them at a high frame rate and then like slowed it down.
Like the original Ghostbusters?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that if you record at a high frame rate and then slow it down to 24 FPS, yeah, because that would make it look like it had
I think
a
they
specific.
did it both ways.
Yeah.
But they either did it slow, sped it up, or they made it fast and then slowed it down. I think they used both.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Ghostbusters, the movie, the original movie, like Bill Murray movie, then that one, the movie's at 24 frames per second. Okay, so what I'm saying is that this is a stylistic decision. The different styles can have different frame rates, but for animation here, most of the time, 24 FPS. Hand-drawn stuff, a lot of times, is 12 FPS. And the name for this is on the twos, right? Meaning that we're drawing every other frame. The frame is being held for this. And then below this, you can also experiment with a bunch of things, like 8 FPS, even for certain things, 6 FPS. It looks, if the images are related, then 6 FPS still looks like animation. It's just choppy animation, right? But
For the new Spider-Man movie where they use different.
yeah,
different characters.
yeah. Okay, so great example, right? If you haven't seen Spider-Verse, yeah, I'll try to find some specific clips to look at that. And if you haven't seen the very first movie, even if you're not into superhero stuff, just I guess if you have to, watch it on mute or whatever. But there's a bunch of things there where they're doing this. They're using frame rate as an artistic decision. Okay, that is the crux of what I'm trying to tell you here. Resolution is not really an artistic decision. You should make your thing HD under almost all circumstances, right? At least HD. Okay, frame rate of the whole movie most of the time is 24 FPS, but when you have a larger number, we can contain these frame rates within this frame rate, okay? So that the overarching container is 24 frames per second. But in the case in Spider-Man, and there's a lot of other movies now that explore this more, we can have not only the whole movie, if your whole movie is at 6 FPS, or let's say it's at 12 FPS, but you make a 24 FPS movie, you just hold each frame for 2 frames, right? And that gives you a 24 FPS container, but a visual 12 FPS, right? And you could do the same thing for these numbers. You could do the same thing for basically any number that's equally divisible into 24, right? And I believe these would be it. No, 4 and 2, but that's pretty slow. So, yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to do exactly the Spider-Man thing, right? So, yeah, weekend homework. If you haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse, it's a really great movie. And the visual animation, there's a bunch of this stuff here of characters moving at different frame rates. So here, let's do this. How do I know what frame rate I'm at? Over here in the render settings, you want to make sure you're in EV, not cycles, in case you flip that bit somewhere else. And then over here in the printer thing, we want to make sure we are 24 FPS, okay? And then right here, there's our HD numbers, 1920 by 1080. It should be, if that's not there, go ahead and set those. Great, and so now I'm going to take this sphere here, and then let's look at it from the side, Shift D, Z, move this down. And so how do I make this ball move at 12 frames per second while this one's moving at 24 frames per second? Well, I don't need to do anything to this ball. It's already moving at 24 frames per second, right? And so this second one here, I'm going to make sure I'm only dealing with that one. Come in here, select that one, and then let's come over to Dope Sheet. Tell me this one in a new location. Transform. our modifiers here. Nope. Let me just look real quick. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. We have to be in graph editor mode. Now, selecting X, and then over here, if you don't have the side window, that's why I was pressing End. That key comes up. And then over here, we have timeline modifiers. Okay. And so click on that. Now, we can add a modifier. And we can use the stepped interpolation. So if I click this, boom. See what happened there? This. See how the line got all stair-steppy here? This is essentially going to reduce the frame rate, or can reduce the frame rate of this sphere compared to the other spheres. And so here, this would be step size. We're skipping every other frame, but we're doing it within our, right, the whole Blender file is running at 24 FPS. The movie that we render out will be happening at 24 FPS, but the visible frame rate of this sphere will be 12 FPS. And so the visual difference, when you have them next to each other, you can see, right? This is part of the reason I made them bright, so it'd be high contrast so we can see it. You can see that this one, again, they're not, one of them is not moving faster than the other. It's just that one is moving at 12 FPS and the other one's moving at 24 FPS. And so let's do this again. I'm going to come back here to the beginning and grab this one, Shift D, Z, move this down. There we go. And with this one, again, selecting it. How do I know I have the right one? Because I just have only show me the selected one on here. And then under modifiers, add a modifier, stepped interpolation. And so here, we're going to say 4. And so this is going to be 6 FPS. So obviously 24 FPS looks quote unquote smoother, but our artistic aim is not always smoother, right? This is a stylistic decision. This is part of the postmodern artistic landscape of making animation. What does this mean? I'm not the first person you heard say this, right? Like people throw this around a lot, right? But let's all get onto the same page about what not everyone knows what they're talking about either, and me included. But like, what does it mean?
I would assume it's also restored to doing animation using computers and no longer hand-drawn.
Kind of. The phrase postmodern isn't just for animation, right? This is more of a historical, cultural phrase, right? And so the idea here, especially in terms of media creation, right, is that what does it mean when something is modern? It is of the time, right? And so especially over the last 100 years, as history has progressed incredibly rapidly, right? We have the modern things, right? The new technology, the new styles, the new fads, right? And something is of that time as things progress through time, right? The phrase postmodern sort of means that we are at a time in history where we're kind of out of time / past the end of time, right? You hear people throw this phrase around a lot, the end of history, right? Where, we have this idea that there's all these things that happened before us, and now we, technically, physically, we are at the end of history, right? We can't go back, and we're just careening into the future at this unstoppable speed, right? But that as artists in the modern day, in general, the aim is not, the consensus of our purpose of artists is not to make modern work. Some people want to make work that looks retro, right? And so the example here that's going to make a lot of sense, I think, to you guys is like pixel art video games, right? So those are not, that's not cutting edge technology to make, Super Mario Brothers 1 now, right? But a lot of people are spending their entire artistic careers making stuff in that style, right? As contemporary people, like people existing now, what used to be called modern people, is that now we exist at the end of history and we can reach back in to all of history and bring that forward in our artistic work, in our artistic identities, right? And that is all a legitimate artistic decision to be made, right? Like I make work that engages with this retro look, right? And you can operate that way now as a quote unquote contemporary artist, right? The words modern and contemporary, if you just look them up in the thesaurus, synonyms, right? But in terms of their cultural application here in talking about art, this modern word, because it's attached to this idea of postmodernism, has a very specific context where it's like most of the time we're talking about postmodernism now, the idea that we as people who live now can reach back into the past and extract those things and put them in our quote unquote contemporary now art, right? And so one of the ways animation engages with this concept is frame rate, okay? Because at one point making animation that was 12 FPS was modern. That was it, right? Like we could only garner enough resources to show and project animation that was 12 frames per second and then have people draw that many pictures, right? That was all a limiting factor. It was the best people could do, right? And so that animation had a specific content and style of that time. And there's people who now reach back in to use that as a part of the style of their art, right? What kind of decisions do you make when you're deciding on the style of your art? There's like the quality of the line, what kind of line it looks like. Does it look like a pencil? Does it look like a computer line? Does it look like a squiggly line? Does it look like a paintbrush? Color, right? What kind of color decisions do you make? Is this going to be red, blue? What color of red? Is it going to be contrasty? Is it going to be low contrast? These are all artistic decisions. You understand what I mean? And what I'm telling you, what I want you to open up your mind here to, is that this is another artistic decision, okay? A lot of times it's manifest in like our MP4 file, but this, especially now, is an artistic decision that you can make. And modern technology allows you to essentially make this decision not for the entire movie, but like on an object by object basis. Hence Spider-Verse, hence this, what we're looking at right here, right? In the same animation, I have objects that are moving at 6 FPS. I have objects that are moving at 12 FPS. And I have an object that's moving at 24 FPS, all on the screen at the same time. Because their smoothness, visual smoothness here, is part of the artistic character I want to give to each of those objects. Does that make sense now? Does everyone feel more confident now throwing around the term postmodern? Okay, that's your off-the-book homework for the weekend, is to just throw it into a conversation with someone over the weekend to really, sound sophisticated. Postmodern. Okay. And so we've got this one. Let's label these. over here, this one is going to be, this is our 24 FPS. Shift D, Z, bring this down. This is going to be, what was this one? This one was on the 2s, and so how many FPS is that? That's right. And then down here, tab this out, Shift D, Z, bring this down. This one, tab, this one was, so this was set to 4 over here, and so that ends up being half again, and so that ends up being 6 FPS. And yeah, we can also, 6 FPS ends up looking like really quite not smooth. So I think a good, another one to just be aware of here. Let's do that. Come over here and put this at 3. And so you got to do the math here, right? Is that this is going to be what 24 divided by 3 is 8 FPS. Right? And they can all live together on the same screen. I give you postmodernism. Right? I mean, the other example you hear people talk about this a lot is with architecture, right? Is that we can have this really, really, really modern building next to some dilapidated shack because history is not progressing at the same speed for everybody at the same time, right? Yeah, I mean, it's part of my ongoing conversational thesis is that, you know, there's the quote, I want to say this is Gibson. I should have that memorized, and I'll let you know next time. Yeah, I mean, once you hear this and think about it, it's patently obvious to everybody, right? But yeah, part of as we go forward in time, the point I've been making a lot to people is that history is sort of being smeared over an even greater amount of time, right? We have people from even further back as people from either even further into the future are all existing at the same time, which, yeah, has resulted in some interesting current situations. Now, it's important to realize that the reason all of these can exist on the same screen at the same time is because all of these numbers are less than this number, okay? The other way I could do this is that I could come over here and just change the frame rate of the entire scene. But that would essentially be the new limiting number, right? Like I wouldn't be able to, I can't have something run at 30 FPS in a 24 FPS file. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like where do the other frames go, right? Like that's part of the discrete nature of animation. Just to point this out here, because once you see it, everyone's like, oh yeah, of course. But if you start to look at it, if I come down here and yeah, there we go. I zoom in like so, and I start to look at this, right? Here's frame 45, here's frame 46. Watch the playhead. What does it not let me do? Yeah. We put everything on the timeline because that's a really great way to visualize it. But what is animation? It is a series of frames shown at a speed, right? And so if you have something on this frame here, and then it moves and onto the next frame, there is no frame in between. Okay, it's not a thing. There's nothing there, and so it either needs to be here or there. This whole issue does get complicated in that when you start moving the keyframes around, depending on how you do that, you can, depending on the settings, move the keyframes in between frames. But at the end of the day, it's going to kind of shift them to one frame or the other frame, depending on whatever frame rate it is that you're rendering at. And so you have to keep that in mind there with all of this. Cool. And let's come back here and look at that. Okay, so with this one in particular, let's render it out. So I've got this set up. I'm going to come over here, and for now, because I don't want to open After Effects, we'll render it out from here. So under the output here, I'm going to come in here and set up a place to put this file. So let's come over to here and make a new one. I'm going to make this renders, and then we will double click in here. And that's where we're going to put this. And we will make we're going to make a video. And now, anybody know the shortcut for rendering a video?
Well,
Control F12 gives us the whole video. F12 by itself is just going to render one frame. Okay, so Control F12, and you see it working on everything. Now, if you hit Control F12 and you see it go frame 1, frame 2, you're probably in cycles, and you need to switch it back to EV. Okay, you see how it's blinking over here? This is a result of remember we wanted it to the compositing view, and we applied the glow. That's how it actually happens. It renders out the entire frame, then it runs all of the compositing Photoshop effects. And so when you're watching it get all the frames together here, it may be so in here, there we go. And I've got this. So I've got the MKV file. If I double click, it should play it. Spacebar. There we go. All right, so they all are glowing. We can switch this. Yeah, so down here under encoding, let's switch it to MP4, MPEG-4, just for the sake of ease to playback. We'll leave it at H.264. Again, these should be the defaults. I mean, MKV was the default there. I'm telling you to switch that one. This should be the default there. If not, switch it to that. The rest of these settings are okay. And if we Control F12 again, now we should get an MP4 file. And a lot of times, this, is going to be what you're turning in, okay? And this, when you guys make your presentation videos for the week, right, this week notwithstanding, a lot of times, it's going to be, I'll ask you to animate something, and you animate it, and then I'll ask you to talk about it in your presentation video, right? When you're talking about it in your presentation video, you should probably render it, then double click on the MP4 and have it playing the movie while you're talking, okay? Because your computer should be able to do this lickety split, right? If you come over here to Blender and you hit play, like right now it's playing it back just fine. But later when we ask it to do more stuff, Blender, especially when you also are recording your video and asking Blender to work at the same is too much, right? Blender's going to slow down its playback in order to do all that stuff at the same time. And so it's going to be a good practice to render out the video and play the rendered version while you're talking about it. There's a little bit of banding in the compression of this one, but we're going to just live with it for right now. We'll go over, right, what were the two main what was the first one? Resolution. And what was the second one? Right, FPS. Yep. There are two, right? I told you there are two. I lied. There's more than two. Okay, so the other one, which we're not going to get into today, is codec, how it is encoded. Because when we have this much stuff, in general, we need to reduce the amount of data to make it something that's easy to transfer over the internet and easy for people to view. And that's what this piece of magic technology does. And just for the sake of demonstration, that's what this is, okay? Because what do we want? We want good-looking movies, right? And do we want them to be huge files or do we want them to be small files? Small. Why?
Because we have limited space.
We have limited bandwidth, right? Bandwidth is more of the bottleneck than the space is, right? And so if you could figure out how to make great looking movies be very small files, does that sound like a lucrative business to be in? Yes, right? And there's lots of people who thought the same thing. Hence this, right? Where it's like, what's going on here, right? There's a lot of different schemes, right? And this is just a small taste of the world of codecs in terms of this is a problem everyone wants to solve. We want to have the best looking movies possible, but we don't want them to take up a ton of bandwidth. We don't want them to take up a ton of space. And bandwidth is really just space per, transfer time or whatever. So yeah, that's what the codec is. But for right now, we can stick with this one and we'll talk more about some of the other stuff later. Great. And so let me save this one and let's go back and render the other files that we did today. So we have 3 movie files as we work our way through the principles of motion graphics. And so our tweening curves here, if I open that one and look at it, there we go. First of all, I want to make sure that so I press 0 and look through the camera. Okay, that looks good. And now come over here and make sure that I'm at 24 FPS. Again, make sure I put it in that correct folder here. This one is going to be tweening example or tweening curves. Yes?
Question.
Yes.
So you described them as multiple schemes, right?
Yeah.
Multiple. Does Blender have to pay like a license for all those codecs?
Maybe some of them. I don't know. That's possibly, yeah. That's some of the codec technology is proprietary, meaning that you do have to license it or pay a licensing fee. But whether or not you have to pay a licensing fee, I don't know. Like Blender's technically a nonprofit, so depend on whatever the licensing terms are. I'm not a lawyer. But there are some codecs that are open source, right? This is part, right? Has anyone ever been a Mac computer person? Right. Part of one of the issues there is that there were never any HDMI outputs on a Mac because HDMI, the plug, right, the little trapezoidal-shaped plug, is a licensed technology. If you have an HDMI port on your hardware, you have to pay a licensing fee to Dolby? I have no idea. Whoever owns that, right? And so anytime, and for a period of time, Steve Jobs was like dead set against not paying that licensing fee. And so he refused to put HDMI ports on Mac computers. So hence they developed their own open source standard that really only they used. Hence, everyone who owned a Mac had to have a whatever it was, like DVI to HDMI converter to plug into anything for like a good 10 years. So the answer is kinda, some of them, maybe. I'm not a lawyer. So that's the cliff notes there. Yeah. So there we go. Video. There we go. And then let's render this one out. Control F12. Yeah, so if you see it flickering like that, it's just because it's rendering so fast that you don't have time to see it apply the glow filter. But this is one of those rare instances where the quote-unquote problem is that we're rendering too fast, right? That's not going to be it's as they say in The Wire, that's one of those good problems. So, how many of you watch The Wire? Anybody? No? Okay.
Is it the one with he's like on a wire?
No, it's a cop series on HBO from
No.
25 years ago.
No way.
It's older than some of you probably. And so if we look at this over here, there we go. Right, and so here's the one we just did. Here's the other one. And so note, how did this one get a proper name? Is because over here, after I picked a folder, I appended, right? So here's two computer words you'll hear me use, append, and this means add to end. And then you'll hear me use this one too, which is prepend, which if you had to guess, add to what? To the beginning, right? Right, so like when you have a chunk of stuff, you put something after it, that's appending. If you put it at the beginning, that's prepending. And so here I appended the file path with this, which is going to end up being the name of the movie, okay? And then that's why this one has the name there. Even if you forget to do that, you can always come back in and rename the afterwards. And so this is FPS example. There we go. And let's say here, for the sake of my sanity, I'm going to ask you to do this for Rena, which is my last name, underscore, whatever. Okay, so I'm not going to have some sort of draconian naming convention that I fail everybody for if you don't get it right, but just put your name on the files, okay? So that when I download, like, here's how this works. On Wednesday, I download everybody's stuff, and then we watch it, and it makes it much easier for me to know what's happening if you have your name on your files. And I'm not like, who's this? For 45 minutes. Great. And then let's save that one, and we'll render our other one, which was this one over here. There we go. And again, let's look at the render view. I think this is the one, or no, this is right. Okay, there we go. And again, over here, select the folder. Renders and accept. And then here, this is going to be fundamental tweening. And this is going to be a video and an MP4. There we go. And Control F12. There we go. Give it a sec. Sometimes this initial handoff seems to take a minute. I have two Blender files open. Is that gonna just hose everything here? What's going on? Here. Hmm. And there we go. There we go. This computer here doesn't like having multiple versions of Blender open at the same time. You can have multiple versions of Blender on the same computer. That, for the most part, doesn't seem to cause a problem, but having them all open simultaneously can be perhaps not the best call. There we go. And now I should have 3 movies. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Everything's all together there. Cool. All right. I think we were answering a lot of questions as we went along. We'll continue to work our way through our fundamental principles on Wednesday. Again, a lot of the setup stuff here in terms of setting up the lights and the compositing and the cameras, I was really just showing basics to, have this look interesting so it's fun-ish to work on. There's more, deep dive to happen there with all those things. But in terms of getting things rolling, there we go. Any other questions for today? Okay. Remember, between now and Wednesday, think about throwing postmodernism into a conversation. Just casually, just throwing it around. Because now you know what it means. Okay, awesome. See you everybody on Wednesday. Tomorrow, homework due at 8 p.m. A lot of you probably already done or gotten started, right? And Fabio, the tutor, will be available on, virtually via Discord. So great. All right, talk to you then.
See ya Wednesday.
Wednesday.
See ya.
Hey, how's it going? Just finished class.